Hello and welcome to another episode of the Maverick Mystic Arts podcast. In today's episode, we're going to continue with our exploration of the walkthrough of Franz Bardon's initiation into Hermetics, and today we'll be looking at step 4. So this step begins the introduction, a very short introduction, with an admonition to encourage the work done in the previous steps, to really take your time, move through what's been learned, and take your time to develop the skills. Now, there's a lot of value in staying on the basics for periods of time and really ingraining them and developing those skills. However, it's very difficult as a teacher to set into motion a cemented learning framework because everybody's working from different spaces. So because we're all coming to this work from different levels, we need to take that into account. And some of us will have blockages towards some of the more beginning aspects of the training, and we'll be very open to more advanced elements of the training. And if we stay on the exercises that are very difficult for us, this will inhibit our growth. Now, of course, we will also grow from staying on the exercises that are hard. However, what's very fascinating is that if you allow yourself the freedom to move through the training process, you can return to those areas of difficulty and suddenly they're no longer difficult. So anyway, you can explore this on your own. Certain mindsets have a very difficult time and not moving in a very linear manner. And that in and of itself can be one of those blockages that we work through and explore. So anyway, put time in, of course, develop the foundation, but also have as much perspective and freedom of perspective to allow for exploration of the further steps in the training, even if some of the beginning foundational work might be tricky. And then you can explore and you can sort of sliding scale yourself back and forth and have some fun with it. And the evolution tends to be a fair bit faster. Now, step 4, the schooling of the spirit or the mental training. This entire step is devoted to mental transference, or the transfer of consciousness, of the identity. So this begins with the transfer of the identity, the consciousness, and this evolves. What we identify with now will be different from what we identify with years from now, in terms of how refined and cosmic, we could say, how refined our identity can find unity, right? Or at what level of refinement our identity can find unity. So this begins with a very, very coarse level of identity, which should be that of physical objects. So the first portion of this exercise is described as, okay, you can find an actual object, maybe it's a cup, right? A pot, whatever it might be, and you imagine yourself as the object, right? You can also take a physical object, memorize it, close your eyes, and take yourself into the visualization or the envisioned object and imagine yourself as that object from the visualization, right? Both of these work, and both are easiest done with the eyes closed. Now, one thing that can be very fun here is to take, say, the Platonic solids and start to work with those in terms of physical objects and shapes, because there is a lot of through flow with the Platonic solids into higher level work. Now, while you can do this with any object, and Bardon suggests just household objects, like I picked up the cup here, there does seem to be power in particular types of objects, particular types of physical shapes. Hence, you would have, say a cross, or a like a Merkaba type of double tetrahedron or Star of David, a cube, whatever it might be. That would be back to the Platonic solids. You might have the shape of a mandala, a bell, something that has a slightly more sacred connotations to it. And because of all of the hundreds of years, the centuries put into working with sacred objects, when you transfer into them, there is more that we can explore and learn from them. So of course you can do this with anyday objects and everyday objects, and the more sacred the object, the more sacred typically the learning and experience will be. So what does it mean to transfer the consciousness? Well, you look at life as, okay, what is life from the perspective of this object? What is it to be a cup? Where is your center of balance? What is the view from that particular place on the table? What does the world look like, feel like? What is it perceived as from the perspective of mental space? What is it like to be confined to the particular shape of a cup? What is that like? Is the mental space morphs into that of the object of the observation that we are becoming? And that is one of the keys to mental transference, is we're transitioning at this stage from what we might call observation of the object and becoming of the object, right? And this allows for a type of unity, an empathy, a unity that dissolves separation. And this is essentially what happens as we start to reach through even the beginning mental training exercises of observing the thoughts, or one-pointed concentration in particular, where from that samadhi approach, the object and the observer, they merge and become one thing. And so this is a coarser version of that as we are working with coarser material. So the object and the observer merge, okay? And this is the key to mental transference, to this transfer of consciousness, because now you are the thing, you are the object of your observation, and you are observing from the identity, the place, the space, the senses of that object. Okay? So that's the first portion, physical objects, or imagined physical object. Then, of course, I would add in here, a next stage would be, say, a tree, right? Mentally transfer consciousness into the tree, sit with your back to a tree and be a tree, right? There's so much you can learn through being a tree. So you can start to explore stationary, live objects, right? In quotations, because of some of the connotations there. And we want to get over this lack of animation that we might view nature from, right? What is it to be a tree? To experience vast swaths of time, right? What if you have access to an old growth forest, a Douglas fir tree that's 800 years old? What is it like to have lived through 800 sets of seasons, to have watched summer, fall, winter, spring cycle through 800 times, to have observed these waves of environmental catastrophe and chaos and storms and beauty, to have birds roost in you, right? What is it to be a tree? There's so much there. To breathe as a tree, to be unable to pick your roots up out of the ground and walk to just be in a place, to take care of the forest around you as you become more deeply and deeply entrenched, and those roots start spreading further and further, and you start merging with the biology, with the mycelium, and there's these interrelationships occurring, and you're helping give life to smaller trees, and there's so much there. So what is it to be a tree? Can you sit, say, with your back to a tree, merge your consciousness with the tree, and be a tree? What does the world look like? What does it feel like? What does it taste like? What does it smell like? From every sense gate you can work with, and of course from, say, the intuitive space of the mind or the identity itself. Mind not as in mind, but mind as in mind. Okay, so take live objects. It is much different to be a tree, an old growth tree, than it is to be a young, 10-year sapling. It's much different to be a tree than it is to be moss, right? So this is a wonderful way to start opening up your relationship with nature. If you like gardening, etc., whatever, that type of thing, what is it that you're gardening? If you're going to grow food, what is it to be a zucchini plant or whatever it is that you're growing, to be a strawberry, to be that plant, to be those leaves, to take on that shape? So that's the next stage, and this can be done once again. Start with the eyes closed, then progress to the eyes open, right? And make sure that at this stage too, you can allow for the actual physical tree or object and the imagined or the visualized, envisioned version, right? From within and from the actual context of outside. Then we progress to animals. And at this stage, he makes a clear distinction about the imagined animal. In step 3, you look at how does that thing move? Like, what are all the attributes of it? Now you take on, you mentally transfer into different animals that fly, that creepy crawl and walk, that are predators, that are prey. What is the difference between mentally transferring into a deer versus a bear or a cougar, if you're in this part of the world? The different types of birds. What's the difference when you take on the shape and transfer into an eagle or a seagull? Big difference. A crow, big difference. And this gets into the shamanistic side of things, when in the sense of becoming animals, morphing into animals, shape-shifting, more or less. And this skill of shape-shifting, of seeing, feeling, hearing, observing, acting through the world as an animal, in many different animals, allows for the development of a flexibility of mind, right? It allows the mind to take on all these different forms and shapes and attitudes as the mental body, the astral body, and even the physical body start to shift and make these subtle changes to adapt to the qualities of the thing we are mentally transferring into, right? So you have the animals. Once again, you can do it eyes closed. You imagine the animal, and then eyes open, and you imagine you are that animal again. And you can walk through a forest and be, a bear, right? There's lots of value in this. And in a lot of Kung Fu systems, martial arts, in more traditional contexts, you take on the attributes of the animals. And these were often set into different styles and sort of codified as styles. But one thing that really opens up the perspective here is, can you take the same archetype of motion and run different animals through it as you transfer into embody different animals and start to, what is it to be a snake doing this motion? What is it to be a crane working through this motion? This motion as expressed through the personality, the spirit of the crane, of the snake, of the tiger. Add in, whatever animal you choose. And you can start exploring that. It's a lot of fun. The next stage that Bardon brings you to is people. People that you are familiar with, of course. And you do this from the space of the visualized person. Now, a big change here is instead of observing all the intricacies of the person, you are becoming that person. So let's say you take a parent. What is it to be your father, to have gone through every experience that he's gone through? What is it to see the world from his perspective? To feel the world from his perspective, hear it, to have the experience with all of the emotional backstory, all of everything. What is it to be that person? And here you get this relationship between like really good actors and the crossover skill set to some of these spiritual freedoms of perspective. Now, this is much different than just making very clear observations, because now your understanding of the people whom you are close with starts to drastically increase, right? And in order to do this, in order to really, especially with family, to really try to be that person through the imagination and see the world, perceive the world from the perspective of that person, with all of their history, this can really take a nice swing, knocking out a peg of our own ego and identity, especially in relationship to family, because that is where we have from the deepest parts of our memory and experience, even like epigenetically, where we are being conditioned, right? So we have so much conditioning with family that this can really offer a wonderful point of breaking free and of empathy and understanding and being able to actually engage with family in a healthier and positive way without your own personal bullshit making you treat people or perceive the people you're close to in habitual ways, right? Typically, we see a person, especially from family, from like if you grow up like that, you grow into habitual perceptions of people. So what would it mean if you could see someone for who they are? And if you could allow your perceptions of somebody to evolve to the point where every day, in every moment, you allow them the space to grow, to change, to be whoever they can be, and you don't impose their past, your version of their past, onto their present and onto their future. So we offer up through this exercise the potential for deep understanding and deep freedom for everyone we're close to. Once again, done eyes closed, then eyes open. The more complex the circumstances of the exercise, the more difficult it can be, so start with your eyes closed. The next stage is people who you've never met, the unknowns, right? And we explore this from the space of, again, the imagination. Okay? And this is any type of person, any gender, any color, any whatever, insert all the different types of imagined people and embody them, right? If you travel to other countries, it's it can be very, very different, right? If you go through Africa, some of the small villages, it's very different. If you go through small villages in Nepal, so poor, very, very different. In Laos, like not the main tourists, but even those, but if you go off the beaten path, rent a motorbike in Laos and just go off into the boonies, the type of life is so different. What is it like to really perceive the world from that perspective? So to be that, right? Become it. The value in mental transference is off the charts. It's nuts. And as this keeps growing, it's through this that you end up working with higher vibrational frequencies through deity yoga, etc. Planetary magic, constellational magic, invocation. This is the foundation, right? To allowing, say, a relationship with the deity comes through and makes alterations to the mental body, the astral body, the vital and physical bodies, and you unify with that deity or with the being you are invoking. If you're doing invocation, if you're doing evocation, then it's a different thing. So you're unifying with this, right? And any object of meditation, any frequency we're working with, we are unifying with it, which essentially we, object and observer, frequency and us, are becoming one. So this is one of the most fundamental key exercises for this entire path. It's foundational to everything. Now, the difficulties that can be had here lie in allowing the shape of the mind to transform, the shape of the body, the emotions to transform. If you have incredible amounts of, it might be rigidity of mind, this can be very difficult. If you have like very poor health in terms of the flesh, right? Like unhealthy tissue, very rigid, hard tissue. It could be from microbial things, and there's all kinds of health things that can create very poor health of the tissue. This can be hard because the tissue starts to become hard, right? And its ability to shift and change is difficult. Lots of inflammation makes it difficult for flexibility of mind to express itself. So just as an example, there was a stage when I had some incredible concussion, post-concussion, post-concussion, on top of all kinds of weird pre-existing inflammation through Lyme's disease and all kinds of stuff. And the ability to change my object of meditation was so difficult that the actual skill, the quality of the meditation would degrade for long periods of time until everything, all that rigidity, could slowly adapt to the new shape and the new object of meditation. So this can be difficult, right? When we're shifting what it is that we are unifying with, what it is, the place from which we are identifying, the space from which we are identifying, it can create a lot of, like, what do you call it when you're, like, motion type sickness? Your perspective's different. The way in which you are used to perceiving and acting through the world changes. And so everything that's involved in your balance, in the balancing of the horizon, can be like being on a roller coaster. So this can be tricky for people, and there is a dramatic freeing of the mind and freeing of perception that can occur on the other side of this. Okay, now the following parts of this step 4 in terms of the schooling of the soul, the schooling of the body, are very, very helpful for facilitating the conditions that allow for the freedom of the mind to ebb and flow and change form and change shape. Okay, this can be a lot of fun. You can have so much fun with this, especially exploring the animals, exploring your connection with the people you're close to in your life, your empathy, your understanding. There's a lot of other takeoffs and tendrils of this exercise that it really, we want to make sure we've done some really good work on our black and white mirror, that we have really good will for the world around us before we begin to explore in any specificity. So there are many potentials here, but what we've discussed here is a great way to open the door. Okay, there are people who do this work who aren't good people, who want power, manipulation, these types of things. And so that is why we will keep a lot of the other tendrils from this video. But explore this, it's so much fun, okay? As we continue here with the training of the soul and the astral substance, we work here in this step 4 with the 4 elements. And we work on accumulating the elements first individually in different regions of the body. Now, this could be any of the different organs. This could be a foot or your feet, the hands, the fingers individually, different sections of the fingers. The more awareness you have of your body, the more you'll be able to accumulate the elements in specific regions. And this has a lot of value. Now, this is where Bardon introduces the transfer of consciousness within the body. Okay, and this is the mental transference, the location from your identity, essentially, from where you perceive the world into particular areas of the body. And from that space, you breathe the element into that space and build it. So this is one of the methods given here. And you're working multiple different skills when you're doing it this way, and there's a lot of value in that. Now, the other methods, of course, you can read through, and they're a touch simpler in the sense that they don't involve the skill of mental transference to any great degree. So what's nice about this particular schooling of the astral body here is that it works the mental transference and the mental training in the first portion of this particular step. So you work through with each element, and you really work on bringing the qualities of that element into whichever region you're working on, building the energy into the region. Let's say you're loading your hand up with the fire element, and you're compressing and really saturating that hand with the fire element. Does it feel hotter than the rest of the body, right? Is there more agitated, and by that I don't mean angry, I mean moving energy, expansive electric energy in the hand, right? And you want to be able to feel that contrast between the location that you're loading with the element and the rest of the body. Okay, this is learning how to bridge the body with the element, with the astral. So we're getting a body-soul type of connection, strength, and resilience with each of the elements in all parts of the body as we play. There are particular protective things mentioned here about not loading the brain or the heart, and that's usually a good idea to observe those warnings. Unless you know yourself incredibly well, there's no need to do any damage to ourselves. The next portion of this training of the soul, the astral body in this step 4, is astral equilibrium. This is magical equilibrium, more or less. Okay, and this is the most effective way that I've ever encountered of very simply, efficiently, and powerfully inducing a state of equanimity in ourselves. So that is, of course, the loading of the elements into their respective regions of the body: fire to the head, air to the chest, water to the abdomen, earth to the legs, and you build them in and observe them simultaneously. Anytime I've ever, since working with this method, that I've had particular psychological and emotional upset, I do this and immediately, just everything's equanimous, and I can actually have more clarity and practice well, and be a better person instead of getting wrapped up in the, swirling lack of balanced elements and emotions and thoughts that might be running rampant. So lots of value in this exercise, and he goes through a little list of some of the benefits of it. So I'll read through some of them. The student is protected from destructive influences and the negative side of the elements, right? Because you are learning how to build harmony of the elements into the system. So the astral body and the physical, in terms of the physiology, chemistry that's associated with the elements, is learning how to be in harmony, right? The student, when he's attained magical equilibrium, can find himself in the center of occurrences, in the sense that he sees all laws all coming into being and passing away in the universal and true perspective. So once again, if you are in a state of equanimity, right, this allows for clarity, which means that we don't peg our identity onto meaning, imposed meaning. We don't need to lean the identity into a particular view. We can watch a situation come into being. We can watch that situation dissolve out again. And this presents an incredible peace of mind, peace of perspective that allows us to see more truthfully, because we're not getting swept away in the cascade of waves as that tide of arisings happens, and we're not getting swept away as the tide of cessations pulls out. So lots of value in that one. Another one mentioned here, the student is not affected by many ailments and calls forth an equilibrating effect upon their karma, and because of this, the destiny, right? So then he becomes increasingly resistant towards unfavorable influence. Okay, so equilibrium, clarity of thought, and choice, essentially, choosing goodwill, and the laws of cause and effect start to be tweaked. Well, I mean, they're the same, but the way in which we're engaging with the world changes. And because of this change, our causes change, right? The causes that we put out change because we are acting from a place of balance. We're thinking and perceiving from greater and greater layers of balance, equanimity, feeling from that plane as well, balance, equanimity. So this changes how everything moves through us, which changes, of course, all of the causes that we put out into the world. Right? And when we are putting out causes into the world, we want to look at this ripple effect, right? Of cause and effect across time. What you do now, how does it affect everything around you? And how does it affect how everything around you affects everything around it as it moves out? And this creates, over time, very tangible perspectives of the causal web moving out, right, through all these different nodes of central effect and peripheral effect, central cause and peripheral cause. And you give that one a little think. There's a lot inside of those words chosen there. Some of this is, of course, my own expression, but of course you can always get the book and read through it. Let's see, the student cleanses their mental and astral aura and strengthens the mental and astral matrices. So once again, equalization, equanimity. The mind is now balanced and calm, which means the energy that reflects that is in the mental field becomes calm and then can become clean, in the sense that it's not reactive anymore and acting out what we might look at as mental pathologies of thought habits, right? Inducing negativity, etc., etc., etc. When it comes to the astral and emotional stuff, the same thing. Now, the matrices become very important because those give us the health of the mind and the emotions, the health of the body, through when you strengthen them, it is increasing essentially the alignment and resonance, which strengthens the protective Qi. So you are strengthening your alignment, right? If you're into martial arts, If somebody's grounded, balanced, centered, right, they can take a hit a lot more easily. But if they're off balance and they get hit, then all of that, right, all the protective chi's out, and that strike goes through a lot more easily. This is that, I believe it was the Mike Tyson saying, which I can't remember exactly, but the punch that they don't see is the one that gets them or hurts them or knocks them out. And if it's one that you know is coming, you can be aligned and balanced in relation to it. If it's one you don't know is coming, then you don't have the alignment for that protective chi to function. So that is part of the strengthening of the astral and mental matrices, is through deep equanimity and familiarity with the elements. You have a deep subconscious understanding of the alignments of equanimity, and the astral, the mental matrix and the astral matrix can strengthen in relation to balance and to equanimity, so that that becomes what your natural pull is towards. Okay, so these are nice to go through because they're very useful. The student awakens magical abilities. Intuition assumes a universal character. So in terms of intuition and allowing what is coming from above through the superconscious to permeate through the conscious mind and be understood, this is of course a hell of a lot easier when we are working from a state of clarity of mind and clarity of emotion, right? And because we have harmony and balance of the elements, the instinctual preservative nature, right, of the instinct, it becomes less of a burden. And this allows, because it's calm, right, so that it's balanced, which makes it calm, and this allows the light of the intuition to start moving through. Instinct and intuition are often confused, and we want to make sure that we are not claiming intuition, which is of change, growth, progress, evolution, for instinct, which is to preservation, which has value. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of value in having strong instincts when it comes to survival, right? So it depends on what type of world you live in and how you want to engage with that stuff. If you are fortunate enough to have safety as a part of, more or less, a part of your daily experience, it's a lot easier to work from the intuition and have that pass through. If your physical safety, your psychological and emotional safety is at risk all the time, especially physical safety, but you know, it's pretty, the emotional safety is pretty important. So if you're at risk, of course, it's very hard to open up, because it's very hard to find that balance of the elements, because you're always needing to protect yourself, right? So the next one here, the astral senses are refined, of course, because you're working with the elements all the time, and because they're balanced. This allows you to perceive, once again, with clarity. This would be through the, we might say, the feeling gate of the senses. The feeling gate, we could say, of the relationship of sentience to the elements. So, of course, this happens because there's equanimity and quiet. And the more refined the quiet, the more we can perceive. As they say, it's very difficult to listen when you are talking, he said to the video. So keep that one in mind. Intellectual abilities are elevated, once again, because we have balance, we have quiet. This allows for movement of the mind to be more clearly understood and more easily directed, right? Because the elements are balanced. When stimulus comes in, when mental stimulus comes in, it makes it a very far easier to see more of the topic that you are contemplating. because of the equanimity, right? It's very difficult to see more of something and to move with speed and clarity through the mental functioning when we are getting sucked into, the parts that are, momentarily exciting, or pull us in based off, negative, emotional imbalance, etc., that'll have us trying to dig in our identity into a particular line of thought. And this is where you get, sort of that very intellectual type person who's incredibly good at rationalizing or winning an argument, which has absolutely no relationship to truth or validity of what's being said. But the skill of arguing might be developed, and that is developed typically because we need to keep the stability of the identity intact. Okay, so equanimity, super important. That is magical, what Bardon calls magical equilibrium, right? You can look at it as equanimity as well. This method is definitely very, very useful, and it's one of the only methods that I've found when push comes to shove that really seems to work 100% of the time, right? And of course, the more you work on this, the better you get at it, and the more powerful disturbances can be worked through from that space of harmony and equanimity. If you don't work on it and you don't strengthen this, then it will work briefly and maybe a little bit, but it's likely it will not function in a long-lasting way when you're in tumultuous situations. So like anything, you want to build up your strength of this exercise. This step 4 is definitely, of the initiation text, the step 4 is definitely a really good one in terms of how far-reaching the exercises are. Okay. Schooling of the physical body here. So in this stage, this portion of step 4, we start to look at ritual. So what is a ritual? Well, a ritual typically has a vast memory from decades or centuries or millennia of that ritual being performed. So there is a lot of power that's been rolled through a particular ritual, so that when the physical ritual is acted out, the spiritual effects take place through the reverence and the reservoir of power through repetition, accumulated over, centuries. So most, I think that's probably accurate, most expressions of spiritual skill and energy happen through ritual, right? You look at any religious system, it has a ritual. And this allows for a fast and fairly immediate access to the energies behind that ritual. Now, value is that you don't necessarily have to have very impressive skill yourself. You don't necessarily have to have spent, decades, years at least, really cultivating the depth of your relationship to everything that is. You can use the ritual, and it will take the energy and it will shape and form it under the direction of the ritual to carry out a task. Now, rituals have a lot of value. You might have a ritual for creating calm, a ritual for creating the spark that, say, pro athletes might need to have their head in the zone for the game. You have rituals you can create for performance in different arenas, performance in active performance and performance in, say, being very calm, being peaceful. Maybe you have a ritual you do before you go to sleep. And when you begin that ritual, it signals to your subconscious it's time to go to sleep. That's very valuable. So what we start to explore here is creation of our own rituals. So what is it that is important to us that we would like to create a ritual for? And why create the ritual instead of going through the process of being in that space whenever you want? Well, the ritual hits it faster. So in order to empower a ritual, we need to build the energy through an extensive practice over a period of time, right? And you build the ritual, you build the energy you want, you build the mental pathways of expression, the astral changes, the physical changes, all of this in, and you build that energy for a long period of time. Even like in each session, you give a lot of time to this. And then at the end of the session, you essentially seal those pathways of expression and the qualities of that energy into a ritual. And then every day you do that again and again and again until that ritual has power. It has that energy baked into it. And what will start happening is that as you build the energy, let's say it's a mudra type ritual, a different kind of, fingers, whatever it might be. If it's a mudra type ritual or a movement of body type ritual, maybe it's a pipe ceremony, your body will start to act out the physical ritual as the energy builds. So this is sort of the first step, is that you have developed this connection to such a degree that before you consciously go to enact and engage in the physical ritual, it starts to act itself out already, once you've built the connection enough. Then, once that's strong enough, then it reverses, and you do the mudra or the ritual, and it opens the door to all of the history that you have with that particular ritual, and opens that energy immediately. So something I encourage always, or very often, students to do is at the end of a practice session, you have some ritual that you do that loads the energy of that practice session into the ritual, right? And then at the beginning of your next practice session, you open it with the ritual. And that starts you from, a fair bit further along the way. The ritual can be quite short once it's been built, right? It can be literally a word, right? It can be a gesture, and bang, you're off to the races. So there's certainly value in this. He also discusses in the rituals the loading of the elements into the fingers, positive to the right hand, negative to the left hand, and that has value as well. I believe Bardon uses fire, air, akasha, fire, water. Yeah, that's it. Fire, water, akasha, and it's earth and air, or air and earth. I don't use his finger patterns. I use a different one, which is earth, water, earth, water, fire, and air. Okay, and then akasha on the thumb. That's the way that I learned this. So again, earth, water, fire, air, akasha, and because that's how I've learned it, that's how those elements have sort of baked into my own relationship. So this allows you to tap into, or to create rituals with gestures that tap you into the elements, right? If you want to work the elemental component, which is really important and will be a natural part of any ritual. Okay? So, anyway, that's something that's explored in the physical training of this step as well. So rituals, there is a lot of power in them. There's a lot of potential in them. And once they are built, it allows for us to start speeding up our ability to get to deeper states of what we want to work on much faster. Now, There's something else that we need to talk about here in relation to rituals, and that is sort of secret rituals within systems. Again, because of the accumulated power, the reservoir of memory and energy and information and knowledge over centuries, all kinds of different systems had secret rituals that you were only exposed to when you got truly accepted and initiated into that particular group, right? And the idea here is that if everyone does a ritual, it will dilute, it'll pull the energy from that reservoir of power. So Bardon suggests that your personal rituals always are personal and you don't share them, so that you don't dilute the power of that ritual. So when someone else does it, they don't pull from, and we might say like dirty, in a sense, what you've built with their own relationships to it. And that if others are pulling from a ritual that you've created, you have a type of karmic responsibility. So something to think about. This is again that relationship to silence on the path when it comes to your own rituals. So he suggests having them be so subtle that you can do them, say, with the fingers, with the hand in the pocket, that they are subtle. And then they're easy to hide, they're yours. And this allows for a cleaner through path of those rituals. So worth exploring. There's the other side of this too that he discusses, where you can have a ritual built in a way that the lower level novices of a system, right, or of a particular spiritual group do the ritual, and that creates, that essentially feeds the reservoir. And then the higher initiates, the priests or whatever, they pull energy from the reservoir that's being energized and fed by the mass of, what would you call it, like people that are doing those rituals that are of that particular tradition or religion, the sort of householders, the lay folk of that particular group. And so there will be vast astral reservoirs in those situations that the higher level priests and initiates can tap. So that's a bit of a weird one, but it seems to be something that's there. So anyway, this is all stuff that he explores in this last portion of step 4. Some people have a very strong aversion to rituals through, for whatever reason, right? And we want to, if we're going to create a ritual, try to have it, your mindset around rituals be positive, so that you're not also energizing with your ritual some negative self-image for having done a ritual. Okay, so lots here, lots to explore, and I hope you found this helpful in opening up some possibilities for this 4th step of Franz Bardon's initiation into Hermetics. And we'll see you on the next one. If you are interested in training with me, please check out the website in the descriptions, www.taichiinstitute.ca. I have online courses, pre-recorded programs in Tai Chi, as well as Qi Gong, and part of that Qi Gong program is Qi Gong meditation, Hermetic magic, and it's a really nice little course and process. There's also the Zen Den, which is a Q&A video reference library, which is attached to both of those courses, and any questions that you have, you just email them in and I get back to you with video responses as soon as I have internet, which there isn't any here, and time. So the Zen Den has a lot of information on it. There's a lot of videos. So please check that out, and I think you'll enjoy it once you get there. Also coming up June 2025, I am teaching an in-person retreat. It is a 16-day retreat where we will be working through a lot of Bardon's materials, as well as much more from other explorations as well. So that's a level 1 and 2 spiritual initiation retreat, and we'll be doing a lot of fun work there. All right, thank you for your time. Hope you enjoyed this. Practice. Bye.